I'm Dr. Sandeep Goyal from medical oncologist from Mumbai. And thanks, Dr. Bafna and the organizing team for giving this opportunity. Great talks by Prof. Priyer and Dr. Shyam Agrawal. Now, my role is to do a tumor board discussion on metastatic breast cancer, a case discussion. And it's a very challenging because I've got 15 panelists on the list in half an hour with one case. So I'll try to do the best possible. Um, do you want me to read out the names of all the panelists or are they there? Are the panelists there?
Yeah, only the name you can call.
So Dr. Bhavna Avasthi from Delhi, Dr. Ranga Rao from Gurugram, Dr. Vinit Gupta from Delhi, Dr. Pratik Tiwari from Bhopal, Dr. Chandan Das from Chandigarh, Dr. Kumar Saurabh from Ranchi, Dr. Tushar Patil from Pune, Dr. N.K. Body from Calicut, Dr. Chirag Desai from Ahmedabad, Dr. Prasad from Hyderabad, Dr. Niti Rai Zada from Bengaluru, Dr. Saroj Kumar Das Majumdar from Bhubaneswar, Dr. Gautam Makadia from Rajkot,
8 बज रहा है.
Krishna Mani from Hyderabad, and Dr. Mangesh Meka from Pune. Right. So I hope some of you or all of you are there. So let's start with the panel discussion as it is quite late. So I'm going to limit it to first line treatment of HER2 positive metastatic breast cancer. Luckily, the panelists are all from all over India. So we'll get a mix of the treatments which are offered throughout the country. And I'm not going to discuss a case. I'm going to ask a few questions which are pertaining to real life practice because we already heard the theoretical aspects from Prof. Priyer in in HER2 positive metastatic breast cancer. Now, how do we put them into a practice? What questions we have to answer? I'm just going to discuss a few questions of those. So we all know that trastuzumab prolongs survival in women with HER2 positive metastatic breast cancer. We all know that, no point to discuss. So chemotherapy plus trastuzumab is the standard of care. And now the question is, first question to the panelists is, when a patient of HER2 positive metastatic breast cancer walks into a clinic, what are the main treatment decision making factors which you consider before deciding what to give to this patient? And let me start with Dr. Bhavna Avasthi from Delhi as to her opinion, please.
Hello, good evening, everyone. So if I see the first time I see a patient with HER2 positive breast cancer metastatic, I would like to look at the age of the patient, the performance status of the patient, tumor burden that she has, and whether this is a first line setting or is this a pre-treated patient. Are there any other comorbidities like diabetes or cardiac or other aspects that one needs to be aware of? And importantly, in our practice here, one likes to know if there is any insurance coverage available, or is there, what's the paying capacity, so that we can, and we are not looking at a short-term solution here. One needs to be looking at sustaining the treatment over a long period of time.
Well, Dr. Bhavna, you've covered a lot of points. Let me ask Dr. Pratik Tiwari from Bhopal. Would you like to think of anything else, or are these all the points which have been covered?
I think, sir, she has covered all the points.
Right. Anybody else in the panel would like to add anything to this, or this is what is everybody's treatment decision-making factors?
May I? I'm Dr. Saroj Das Majumdar here.
Right.
I'll see that whether this patient has come with any visceral crisis or not, or brain metastasis is there or not. So I'll rule out that. The extent of the disease, which organs are involved.
Right. I think one of the factors which I would like to consider also is whether the patient is hormone receptor positive or hormone receptor negative. So these are the, Dr. Bhavna has covered very well, but these are the things which which I've added. And the hormone receptor status also, I think, would make some difference in treatment decision-making factors. But the most important will be extent of disease presentation, hormone receptor, and again, the cost of treatment, previous treatment, age, and comorbidities. So these are the important points. Now, for this discussion of this tumor board, I have divided two subsets. One is HER2 positive, hormone receptor negative metastatic breast cancer. And the second is hormone receptor positive, HER2 positive, hormone receptor positive metastatic breast cancer. Now, my next question is to the one of the, I'll name the panelists also, is the first line therapy same or different for these two subsets? Would you consider treating them differently or same? Let me ask Dr. Warrior from Calicut. Dr. Warrior? Dr. Warrior, are you there?
No, sir.
Okay, so Dr. Tushar Patil from Pune?
No, sir.
Okay, Dr. Chandan Das from Chandigarh?
No, sir.
Okay, then Dr. Ranga Rao from Gurugram?
No, sir.
Okay, so we are short of panelists now. Dr. Gautam Makadia from Rajkot?
Yes.
Sir, I am there, sir.
So Gautam, can you tell me whether you will treat them same way or the first line will be different for these two subsets?
Sir, I would like to treat a HER2/neu positive plus hormone receptor positive in a slightly different way.
Okay.
Why? Because I feel it is somewhat a good disease biology as compared to the HR negative HER2/neu positive disease biology.
Okay.
And that's why I would like to begin with if the patient is in visceral crisis or a patient is having significant tumor burden, I would definitely use chemotherapy plus anti-HER2/neu therapy.
Right.
But within a short period of time span, I would shift this patient to trastuzumab plus hormonal agent.
Right. That's what we'll all do. But my question is that would you not give these patients chemo upfront, or would you consider giving all of them chemotherapy upfront? So let me ask Dr. Mangesh Mekha from Pune, what would you do? Is Dr. Mangesh there? Dr. Mangesh? All right.
No, sir.
No, he's not there. Okay. Dr. Niti Raizada from Bengaluru.
Yeah, good evening, sir. See, most of the time, I mean, HER2 positive and HR negative is a no-brainer. Obviously, we'll start with chemotherapy and anti-HER2 agent. But in hormone receptor positive cases, if the patient's performance status is not good, if there are multiple comorbs, I'll probably start with hormones and anti-HER2 therapy. But most of the time with high tumor burden, I would prefer to start with chemo and follow it with hormones.
Fine. And exactly agree, but my question was like, suppose the patient who's got very low tumor burden and for example, only bone metastasis, let's say. And so in those cases, would you like how we treat for HER2 negative patients with only hormone, we don't give chemo. So would you consider hormone plus trastuzumab or something of that sort? So let me ask Dr. Kumar Saurabh from Ranchi, would you do the same or would you consider any subset of patients for hormone plus trastuzumab or anti-estrogen therapy? Dr. Kumar Saurabh?
Good evening. For all the patients of HER2 positive disease, if the performance status is good, I would initially start with the trastuzumab plus chemo combination.
All right.
After 6 cycles of chemo, I may shift to trastuzumab plus hormonal agent.
Okay, so you may not will. HER2?
I will.
Okay,
if the performance status is good.
Right. So I think most of us would start chemo plus target in all these patients, and very few patients with low tumor burden or maybe with not extensive tumor disease, we would just maybe start, and if they are not very fit, maybe give hormone plus target. So I think these are options which we have. Now this we have already discussed. Cleopatra study, everybody knows the data. I'm not going to go into details, and that has changed the treatment paradigm for metastatic breast cancer HER2 positive. We also have the PERU study, which is pertuzumab, trastuzumab, and different taxane combinations like docetaxel versus Pacli versus nab-pacli, and that show that either docetaxel or paclitaxel can be used in these patients in the first line setting. So the next question is, now this is more of practical points which I want to discuss here, because theoretically we all are aware of the theory of the evidence. Now Dr. Gupta, if he's there, Dr. Vineet Gupta from Delhi. So do we recommend anti-HER therapy to all our patients of HER2 positive metastatic breast cancer, hormone receptor negative, let's say?
Yes, sir. I'm there. So I think the main limitation which I face in HER2 therapy is financial. So some patients are there who are not able to afford anti-HER2 therapy. But generally, otherwise, I would say the majority, if the finances are not a concern, almost all the patients do get recommended this therapy.
But you would recommend to all of them. That's what my question.
Yes, sir.
And the next question to you only is, what percentage of your patients, actually take dual anti-HER2 therapy? Like suppose you say Cleopatra study, pertuzumab, trastuzumab, docetaxel. How many percent of patients? Because that's a very important point. Theory is different and practicality is different.
Less than 5%, sir, not more than that.
So in Delhi, you would say less than 5% patients would take pertuzumab, trastuzumab combination.
Yes, sir.
Right. What about Dr. Prasad from Hyderabad? Dr. Prasad, are you there? Right. I don't think so. He's there. Dr. Chirag Desai, please.
He has left.
He's also left. Okay. Yeah. Right. Dr. Krishna Mani from Hyderabad.
No, sir.
Right. So we don't have 15 panelists. We have got a few of them. So that makes it easier for me now. So let me ask Dr. Bhavna again. What percentage of your patients would take dual anti-HER2 therapy? Is 5%, as Dr. Vinit Gupta said, or is it more than that or less than that?
So it is around 10% of my patients who would take a dual HER2 therapy.
Right.
And for the others who do not, I do offer them lapatinib and trastuzumab
in the first line
as an option for a dual HER2 therapy. And I'm not talking about a first line. I'm talking about wherever I'm looking at a dual HER2 therapy. Yes,
Okay.
at the first line, I would prefer to use a taxane and most commonly a docetaxel along with a trastuzumab and a pertuzumab.
Right. Dr. Pratik Tiwari, what would be your percentage of patients?
So it is definitely less than 5. There are very few patients who can afford these combinations. So most of the patients are taking trastuzumab with combination with taxane, but not dual HER2 blockade. Only 1 or 2 patients, they are on dual HER2 blockade. Definitely they are doing good, but yeah, affordability is very less.
So any other panelists would have a different viewpoint, more than 10% or more than 5 to 10%? Any other panelists whose practice will be more than that? So I gather that most of us would have about 10% of patients who would go for dual anti-HER2 therapy. So that is the difference between the evidence and what we do in our day-to-day clinical practice. Now, the next question to the panelists is, what percentage would take single, like, trastuzumab? Do you think your numbers have increased since the advent of the generics and the biosimilars? So let me ask Dr. Kumar Swarab from Ranchi, please.
Yeah, actually, with the advent of biosimilars, the number of patients taking single anti-HER2 trastuzumab has increased definitely. And what has added to the increase is also the incorporation of trastuzumab in the Ayushman scheme. So
Right, okay.
now more or less, I believe almost 80 to 90% of my patients who require an anti-HER2 therapy receive anti-HER2, receive trastuzumab.
Right. Dr. Niti, what about your patients? Is the same number, 80-90%?
Yeah, most of the patient would receive anti-HER2 therapy.
So I think that's a big number, and I think that is what we are helping our patients with, because I believe that anti-HER2 therapy has to be given to all patients of HER2 positive metastatic breast cancer. So this is a big jump which we see. Now, the next question is, like, normally we all know we use taxanes, but is that everybody's choice along with anti-HER2 therapy, or would you use something else as well in the first line setting? Let me ask Dr. Saroj Kumar Das from Bhubaneswar.
Yeah. I'll add one more thing. In 2013, anti-HER2 therapy was around 20% in our center. Now we give 100% of the cases, and we start with taxane and trastuzumab.
Right. And normally you would use the weekly or the 3 weekly.
Weekly is preferable, but when patient comes from long distance, then we give docetaxel and trastuzumab. Younger patient who can tolerate like that. Right. Otherwise, weekly is preferable.
Okay. So I think most of us would use a taxane and a trastuzumab plus minus pertuzumab in the first line setting, right? Any non-chemotherapy regimen would you use? Let me ask Dr. Gautam from Rajkot.
Non-chemotherapy regimen, sir, I generally don't use non-chemotherapy regimen to the HER2/neu positive patient upfront, but we can definitely consider trastuzumab plus lapatinib,
right?
In case the patient is not willing or not in a condition to receive the chemotherapy,
right? So I think that would agree. But these are the list of the NCCN guidelines about the whatever options we can use. I think Professor Frere also mentioned about trastuzumab plus vinorelbine. I think he was going more towards that even that is very effective. Although we don't normally use that in the first line, we use it in the second or third line. But I heard in his talk that he was a bit more favoring the vinorelbine trastuzumab combination as well. So these are the different options which we have. And I think based on the cost and the patient condition, we use all these options. Now, there are a few 2-3 slides about this in the elderly patients. This is a study which we came across, a small study of about 80 patients with trastuzumab, pertuzumab plus minus oral cyclophosphamide. And I think in patients who are elderly, fragile, adding oral cyclophosphamide to pertuzumab and trastuzumab gets a better PFS and overall survival than the dual anti-HER2 therapy as well. The Marion study first line TDM1, almost no benefit. So we hardly use TDM in the first line setting. And there's no role of TDM1 plus pertuzumab in the first line setting as well, as compared to chemotherapy and trastuzumab. And again, taxane plus lapatinib versus taxane plus trastuzumab. So taxane plus trastuzumab is better than lapatinib plus taxane. So I think most of us would use the taxane and trastuzumab in the first line setting. Now, this is the most important question for me.
Can I add something, please?
Yes, please, Niti.
If I have to use an oral therapy, probably trastuzumab with capecitabine is what I would do.
Yes. No, that's what the standard. But I just thought I'll show you this because that's an option which we can consider. Some patients who have already used capecitabine in the past, we can still use this. Now, the next question, which is I think the most important in our practice, is how long to continue, when to stop, because there's no limit to anti-HER2 therapy to metastatic breast cancer. So let me start with Dr. Vineet Gupta from Delhi. What do you think? How long do you continue? Do you continue for life? What do you say? What do you do?
So, sir, for patients who are on trastuzumab and who are advanced and started with trastuzumab and chemo, generally I give indefinitely, sir. I don't stop. My experience with pertuzumab is not so great. So maybe with the drug where the remission lasts for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, my answer might be different. But for trastuzumab and chemo, I give indefinitely.
But what, suppose the patient comes and tells you that, I can't afford. So would you tell them to stop or let the patient decide?
Of course, if the patient cannot afford, so in that scenario, maybe I might switch to an affordable drug like lapatinib as continuation. But ideally, if the finances are there, I will give it indefinitely.
Right. And Dr. Bhavna, what would you do? Like, suppose you're giving your patient pertuzumab, trastuzumab, and taxane. Would you continue? How long to continue? What do you tell your patient?
So I like to stop the taxane after 6 or 8 doses. And I do let the patients know that they can continue if they are tolerating, but practically we don't see them tolerate for very long. And then you also want to keep some kitty for later. So most patients would usually come back with peripheral neuropathy and with general fatigue, or just be tired of coming to the hospital and taking chemotherapy all the time. And a lot of them are very, very distressed about their loss of hair and stuff like that. So they want to come off chemotherapy after a period of time. So if their disease is stabilized and one has seen a partial response or a stable disease and the patient is relatively asymptomatic, then continuing trastuzumab alone is an option that I give most of my patients.
What about pertuzumab?
Gilead can be involved, Sandeep.
Sorry?
Dr. Giles Freire is with us. He can also be
Okay,
involved.
so Prof. Freire, what would you do? How long do you continue your patients? And especially, my main question is about pertuzumab, trastuzumab. Taxanes we all stop. You know that.
Okay, sure. Normally, we continue until tumor progression. If the patient, if the tumor is hormone receptor positive, we combine to hormone therapy, of course. But you have some patients that will achieve a complete remission, and that probably and who probably can be cured. There are some series reported in the literature where the patients have stopped their treatment after 5, 6, 9 years, sometimes due to cardiac toxicity, sometimes for other reasons. And in some studies, in some small series, the treatment interruption was planned. What we can see is that patients with very long remission are younger women with hormone receptor positive tumors, and often who benefited from a local treatment of metastasis, bone metastasis or liver metastasis. And hopefully we have some patients under trastuzumab for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and it's really difficult to stop. It's always a discussion with the patient. Usually we don't stop, but if the patient is in complete remission, I think it's very important, no sign of disease, it's likely that in some situation you can stop, but it's always a very, very strong discussion with the patient.
Yeah, I fully agree. You know, I think with my experience, there are very few patients who we have stopped, and fortunately they have not recurred. You know, after 2 years we have stopped because the patient just refuses to take. They just want to come, and and then we just leave the ball in their court, and they say we don't want to take, and then and they luckily have not recurred. So a few patients with as Prof said, that who have complete response, they would continue to do well. So I think. But that's a matter of debate. Now, the next point is about biosimilar trastuzumab, and I think that's what has also changed our practice a lot. We all know about this, and I think most of the biosimilars now are not, as they are doing more work in the characterization rather than clinical trials, and this is what we use. So my question is to the panelists, let Dr. Pratik Tiwari answer this, please. How comfortable are you using a biosimilar instead of a reference biologic? Or do you even give the choice to the patient, or you just start a biosimilar? Dr. Pratik, are you there? Dr. Pratik? All right. Dr. Kumar Saurabh?
If the patient is a panel patient, like belonging to a government sector where finance is not an issue, I would start with the original molecule. But for most of my patients who pay from their own pocket or who take the trastuzumab under the Ayushman scheme, I use a biosimilar because of affordability.
So if the patient is affording, let's say patient is affording, has no problems of affordability, my question is, would you still offer them a biosimilar upfront? If you believe in the biosimilar, then would you still offer them biosimilar upfront, or is it only because they're not affording, then you offer them biosimilar?
No, if they are affording, I would go for the original molecule.
Right. Okay. Dr. Kumar Saurabh, please.
Yeah, this is Saurabh here.
Okay, sorry. Then I think Dr. Pratik was not there. Dr. Niti, what would you do?
If the patient is affording, I would offer an innovator molecule most of the time. But in practice, we use biosimilar very often. Almost 90% of the patients would be on biosimilars.
Right. And so what I gather from what all of us are saying is that if the patient is affording, we would still go for the innovator molecule. Yes. But when we have got the data saying that both are similar, then where the cost come into play?
I think the molecule is, and the data from where it is originated. That makes a lot of difference. So we have
So
scientific.
actually, to be frankly, I do the same. If the patient is affording, I just prescribe the originator molecule. And if, but it's just that that's what a question I'm not able to answer, that when the data is there, then why do we still believe related cost? Anybody else would like to add here about the cost?
I would like to make a comment here.
Yes, please.
When we say that affordability, original versus a biosimilar, one is actually questioning the quality of the biosimilar. I look at the data and the evidence available for that particular biosimilar. And if there is say global data available, if there's an FDA approval available for that biosimilar, then to me that is no different from the originator and from the innovator molecule, because that's the quality is assured. And that is what I would prefer, and I often prescribe it nevertheless to all the patients. And the reality is that there's very little difference and the biosimilar at this point of time if the patient assistance programs and all are taken care of. Regarding biosimilars, which only have data of say 20, 30 patients or 100 patients, less than 100 patients, most of them, I do not want to prescribe them nevertheless. So I would prescribe a drug that I believe in. And then if you believe in it, then the innovator versus biosimilar has no meaning.
Right. Well, I think that's a valid point. The next question here is that suppose the patient is already on original molecule, and would you switch from one biosimilar to another, or from the origin to the biosimilar if the patient complains? Is there any problem with that, or would you just do it at the top of the hat? So let's ask Dr. Gautam.
Usually, sir, I don't change the molecule.
Right.
I never change the molecule because we don't have any much data regarding the same setup, and I always believe in the cross reactions between the molecules, because there has to be some differences in the molecule. So I don't know the exact reason behind this, but frankly, I don't use it. I never change the molecule.
Well, this slide which I've put on is that they have said that, the EU national regulators have said that, you can, in their opinion, switching patients from the original to the biosimilar or interchangeability of biosimilars is okay, because there's not much difference if they are tested properly and if they have gone through a strict quality control and development program. Then switching from one biosimilar to another or from the original should not be much of a problem. Right.
So
now, coming on
another 5 minutes.
Yeah, last session is about the first line treatment of hormone receptor positive, HER2 positive metastatic breast cancer. And we have got, in the right side, we have got the different options of hormone therapy and anti-HER2 therapy. Just a few slides about the data. Tandem study has already been discussed by Prof. Fryer, not much benefit. But then you have got letrozole plus minus lapatinib, and the letrozole plus lapatinib arm is better. The alternative study was dual HER2 blockade plus endocrine therapy, and lapatinib trastuzumab AI versus trastuzumab AI versus LAP AI, and again, the combination was better. The PERTAIN study, again, if you see here, the pertuzumab, trastuzumab, and AI was better than trastuzumab AI. And if you see, the median PFS was 18 months in the pertuzumab, trastuzumab AI arm. And if you look at the Cleopatra, the median PFS initially was also with the pertuzumab, trastuzumab, and docetaxel was almost similar. So again, we have good data here, which you can use in the first line setting. The Monarch HER trial, phase 2, HER2 positive, HR positive, and arm A, which was abemaciclib plus trastuzumab plus fulvestrant, was better than the chemotherapy plus trastuzumab arm. Again, hazard ratio 0.67. So with all this data, there is evidence to use trastuzumab or pertuzumab plus hormone therapy in the frontline setting. So this is my question to the panelists. In the first line treatment of hormone receptor positive, HER2 positive, would you consider initial hormone therapy plus anti-HER2 therapy for any patient or not? Or would you still give chemotherapy to all your patients in spite of this evidence and data? Let me ask Dr. Vineet Gupta, please.
So yeah, at the present time, I would still give chemotherapy and anti-HER2, but I think there is enough data to say that for the combination of trastuzumab, pertuzumab, and hormone therapy, that can be used in some frail patient where chemotherapy is not a good option. So maybe in that one subset where we have frail patient who is not eligible for chemotherapy,
Yeah.
I might go for that kind of combination.
Let me ask Prof. Fryer. Well, Prof. Fryer, what would you do? Would you ever think of using hormone therapy or anti-therapy in the frontline setting?
Well, I think that the PERTAIN results do not dramatically change our standards. I think it's only a phase 2 trial.
Yeah.
It's quite reassuring. I'm sure that in some patients with very indolent disease, frail patients, elderly patients, it could be a good option. However, in my opinion, the combination with chemotherapy remains the standard in first line, and it was underlined by all our colleagues.
Right. Yes, I would agree. So this is the last slide, which I feel, in our practice also we have seen that when we combine patients of HER2 positive, hormone receptor positive, MBC, chemo plus target works better than hormone plus target. This is what my experience has been as well. And I would like to ask the panelists one by one the last question as to would you agree to that, or that whether hormone plus target is less effective than chemo plus target. So let me start with Dr. Bhavna, please.
I agree that this is less effective, and this is very clearly being shown on your slide as well. But then, despite that, there would be clinical scenarios where one would still utilize the combination of hormones plus targeted agents.
Dr. Vineet, your comments? Dr. Vineet? Dr. Kumar Saurabh?
I think you can wind up now, Sandeep.
Okay.